Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar in this series, Making the Most Out of Your Mediatoolkit account. My name is Martina, and I'm Customer Success Manager at Mediatoolkit. In our previous webinar, we covered the basics with setting up queries. Today, we will focus on the metrics and how to manage your mentions in the feed with different filters and options. I will also show you how to export mentions in different formats and how to properly set up digests and alerts to be notified when something new pops up in the feed. Before we start, just to point out again that you can send your questions as we go through Q&A, and I will answer them at the end of the webinar. Okay, let's begin. In our last webinar, we set up some queries in our Mediatoolkit account. Before we go further, one thing to point out is that Mediatoolkit is primarily focused on real-time monitoring. So have in mind that monitoring starts from the moment you set up queries, but the tool will also show you some results for the last 3 months, like we have here in the feed. So in the feed, for each selected mention, we can see the title. There is also a link to open and see the post or web article. We can see the name of website or social media profile who published the mention. We can see here when it was collected. And if we hover over it, we can see the exact time. The location of the mention can be seen by this tiny flag. If you see more than one flag here, it means that the tool didn't have enough information to know the exact location, so it suggested more countries as a potential origin of the source. We have a picture if the mention has one, and beneath we have some metrics. The first one is reach, that shows estimated number of people that saw this mention. How Mediatoolkit algorithms determine reach? Well, there are two categories, one for social media and another one for websites. For social media, the system takes into consideration the number of followers on a page or profile, number of shares, comments, and likes, each having its own value. For websites, the reach is calculated from global pages that monitor visits per day on certain websites. Furthermore, it measures whether the news was on the main page, subdomain, or subcategory, is the keyword mentioned in the title or somewhere on the site. Near reach, we have interactions that show number of people that liked, commented, or shared the post. The system updates this number for a maximum of 7 days after it was posted. Engagement rate is a ratio between these first two metrics, and it shows the percentage of people who interacted with the post after seeing it. We also have an influence score that shows how influential this source is, for example, this one, from 1 to 10, based on the number of the audience. So in the feed, Mediatoolkit will automatically show you mentions for the last 30 days. Here on the right, we can see how many mentions were selected in that time period, but we can also change the time range here. If we click on it, on the right, we will see some suggested options like last month, this month, last 7 days, and so on. Or we can click here and set an exact date range that we want. For example, I will choose from January 15th until today. We can even determine the time range by hours and minutes here. Below that, we have some different options to filter out results in the feed. This won't affect your setup. It will only help you to sort out mentions in a desired way. So by default, the mentions are sorted by time. It means that you will see the newest mention on the top of the feed. If we choose reach, you will see the post or article with the biggest reach on top. Or with virality, you can see which articles were more shared on social media than an average article from this specific website. For example, this one or this one. If we go further, you can also filter out results based on the source. For example, to see only web articles, tweets, and so on. You can also filter out mentions based on the sentiment. For example, only to see positive ones or negative ones. There is also a possibility to choose reverse order of mentions in the feed, so you can see the oldest one on the top. So this is the option where you can see the first one since the 15 days ago, according to our time range. Additional filtering can be achieved by choosing the option to group similar mentions. This option allows you to see only one mention in the feed and below the information which other sources have also published it. This rule applies to mentions that match at least 80% of content. Let's see if we can filter out. Oh, here we go. Okay, let's find some mention where we have grouped, where there are grouped similars. Here is one. So here you have one mention and an information where else it was published. So if I click here, you can also see those mentions and links where you can open them as well. Okay, let's go back to filters. At the end, you have an option to see pictures in the feed or not to see them. Okay, now let's go back to the mentions. If you hover over, you will see a small X sign on the top right corner. And if you click it, you will see some options for this post. For example, we can delete it by clicking on Remove this mention from the list, or we can block this author completely from monitoring in this query. We also have an option to block this source, like here it is Twitter, or we can exclude monitoring from this language. It is important to know that those three blocking options are shortcuts to editing a query. So I would advise to use it only if needed, because after editing a query, the tool will leave you with mentions in the feed only from 3 months back. The reason for that is because every edit the tool considers as if the monitoring started from the beginning. So if you want to have an archive from the moment you started monitoring a query, I would advise first to export all the mentions and then choose to edit the query. I will show you the export options a bit later. Okay, so now let's go back to the filters. To show you that by clicking or on X, or better even on this blank space around the mention, you will change the right sidebar and it will reveal options for an easy analysis of each mention. It will reveal the exact time and date when it was collected. And we also made it possible for you to get an automatic translation of web article if it is in a foreign language. Just let me find an example. Okay, here it is in Japanese. And by clicking here, you will open a new tab with automatically translated text by Google Translate to the language of your Mediatoolkit interface. In this case, it is English. Okay, if we click here on this drop-down option, we will see if the mention was selected only for one query or more. Here we can see that it was only for one. But let me see, I believe this could be for 2 queries, yes. Here we can see that it was selected for query Mediatoolkit and for Bonfight. Below that, we can change the sentiment if we don't agree with one that Mediatoolkit recognized. And how does Mediatoolkit determine sentiment? It is based on the positive and negative words in the text. So if you want to change it, it will be updated everywhere else in analytical part, export, and so on. If the article or post is assigned to more than one query, we can determine sentiment separately for each query. So for example, for one query, the sentiment can be positive. Let's say for Mediatoolkit, we'll confirm it is positive, or we don't have to change it. But for bonafide, we want to change it to neutral. So when you change sentiment manually, here on the left side, you will see that this dotted line that shows the automated sentiment changed to a full line. This, if the line full or dotted one is green, it means that the sentiment is positive, gray means neutral, and red means negative. Okay. Tagging, here we have tags. Tagging is another useful feature. For example, some clients check their company's name and tag each article depending on the context in which the company is mentioned, like company in general, CEO, or press release if you had one. Okay, so for example, okay, we can go with this one. Here, Mediatoolkit is mentioned for a new mobile app. So we can tag it and say, mobile app. Tagging makes reporting way easier if you're limited with the number of queries, because in the custom reports, you will be able to see how each tag is performing. Okay, below, we also have some statistics for this mention. Okay, let's find one that has something to show. Like here for this tweet, we can see number of retweets, number of favorites. Virality is not shown because it is for Twitter, and virality is shown only for web articles. So let's find one example for web. I will go here, filter out web. And let's see, here we have something. Yeah, here we can see number of shares and comments on Facebook. If there were any, we could see it for Pinterest, LinkedIn, or Reddit. And below, you can see the statistics about virality of this article. Here we can see this one. It says 1x. It means that this article was, its virality was an average as usual this source has for its articles. So it wasn't anything, it didn't achieve any more shares or comments on social media than the average article from this source. If we had a 0 and a 0 here, it would mean that there were no shares or comments. Or maybe 2, it would mean that this article achieved twice times more of virality than an average article from the source. Okay, and below we have an information about MozRank, for example, this one. Okay, so this was an example how to manage one mention at a time. But if you want to manage a large number of mentions at once, like change the sentiment for them, delete from the feed, or simply export them, there is a great feature that can help you. It is called analyst mode, and we can find it here on the top. So it is near the viewer that you normally see Mediatoolkit, and just by clicking here, you will see an option to mark articles or posts that you wish. Let's choose these 3. And then you can remove, for example, delete those mentions from the feed by clicking here, or you can export them into different, in different types of exporting. I will show the export options a bit later. And you can, for example, send them to email to your colleague. The colleague doesn't even have to be included in your Mediatoolkit account. You could just add the email address here and click send. Also, with these marked mentions, you can choose to change the sentiment for them with just one click. If we click, for example, here, the sentiment will be positive for all of them. Or you can tag them all at once, like here if you enter a tag. Okay, if we go back to viewer, the tool will ask us if we want to save those mentioned in collection. And this is an option that enables you to go further with Mediatoolkit, do something else, and then later on come back, continue with adding more mentions, and then you can choose the option that you intended for those mentions, like export them, change sentiments, and so on. So I saved it, and Here, if I go back to analyst, it will say unnamed collection, or you can name it. And then I can continue with adding more mentions. You can even add mentions from different queries. Okay, I will delete all of this. Let's go further to the options here on the top with alerts. So if you or your colleagues prefer to be notified when every new mention appears in the feed, you can set up alerts for the desired query or a folder. Let me show you how. So here we don't have any alerts set up. I can click Add Alerts, and here I can choose a folder or a query. Let's choose Mediatoolkit. Here you can choose in what way you want to be notified. You want to receive alerts, if you want to receive them on your email, or if you use Slack integration in your Slack channel in your company, you can manage Slack integration here. HTTP post is for sending alerts to URL endpoint in JSON format, also called webhooks. If you have downloaded our mobile app, you can even manage push notification and set them on here. Here we have an option to choose if you want to have some specific time of day, for example, when you don't want to be notified, when you don't want to receive alerts. So with these options, never, it means you will always receive alerts whenever a new article comes in the feed or a post. But with this option, you can specify, for example, that you don't want to be alerted after working hours. So you can choose this time frame. Or you can select that you don't want to be notified, for example, on the weekends. Or if that is not enough, you have custom options here. With this delay alerts on silence option, you will receive alerts for all mentions that were selected during your silent period. So here you can turn it on. With discard similars, you will not receive similar mentions with similar content. Or here in general, you can snooze this alert for some time. Okay, I will choose it to be notified on email, silent never, and I will create new alerts. You can also choose some other user here on the right and set stop alerts for them. For example, if your colleague doesn't manage in Mediatoolkit well, or your boss doesn't have time, you can set up alerts directly for them here. Okay, if you don't want to be notified for each mention, like here in alerts, but simply get an overview of new mentions once a day or twice a day, then digest would be the right option to choose. So let's see digest. We already have some set here, but I will create a new one. Again, we need to choose a folder or a query. And here we have to specify in which time we want to get digest, for example, every day at 8 a.m. Here you also have an option to receive digests, or even better, like Excel export or a report PDF with charts every first day of the month, and to receive like charts for the mentions of the previous month that you can manage here. You can choose weekly digests or even custom. If you don't want to use any of those options, you even have an option to specify a time interval to get notified, like every 2 hours, every 4 hours, and so on. Okay. We have different export types or digest type here. You have mentions in email. That would be our standard digest layout, with mentions shown in a similar way as you see them in the feed. So you can choose here if you want to order them by reach, virality, or time. Normally in digest, you will receive mentions, you will receive 5 mentions, and then a link to open your Mediatoolkit account to see the rest. But if you want to receive more than 5, you can choose here, you can mark this option here, and then you will receive up to 50 mentions in one digest. Okay, for example, for an Excel, you can choose basic or rich Excel type. In basic, you will receive some basic information about each mention, and in rich, you will receive everything like from sentiment, from tags, number of likes, and so on. You can choose if you want to receive it as a link or as an attachment. If you choose PDF, you can choose to see the brief with index at the beginning or without. With Word, you can choose to include some statistics or include highlighted keywords. And with Report PDF, with charts, you can choose to receive basic or advanced reports. Again, we have some options here to specify more. With this option, merge with other digests. If you have more digests set up at the same time, but for different queries, with this option, you will receive only one email for all queries. With discard similar mentions, again, you can choose to receive only mentions with the new content. You can turn this option on to be notified when there are no mentions, so you know that everything is working well, but there were simply no mentions from the last digest. And here you can snooze this digest if you wish. Okay, let's create this digest, and again, here you can manage digest for your colleagues as well. Okay, finally, we have an export option if you wish to create, digest, or any other type of document on the spot. So for example, with digest, you have to specify the exact time when you want to automatically receive digests, but with export, you can automatically export it right now. So again, choosing folder or a query. Here you specify the time range, and even more, you can specify source type if you don't want to receive all mentions, but only from or only web articles or tweets. And again, export types like we saw in digests, and just click send to email. With this last feature, we have covered everything planned for today's webinar. I hope you found it useful and helpful in your navigation through your mentions. Let me see if there were some questions. Yes, let me go through your questions and answer that. Okay, what is MozRank? Well, MozRank is a ranking score developed by Moz that predicts how well a website will rank on search engine result pages. I would advise you to Google to see more information about MozRank if you're interested. Okay. We have any other questions? No more questions. So I hope it means that everything was clear. Once again, thank you for participating in today's webinar. The recording will be sent to your email in a few days. I hope to see you in our next and final webinar, where we will cover analytical dashboards within reports. But as I wanted to finish webinar, I received another question. Just let me see. Do you have only public information from the social media? Yes. We share only public information from the social media based on the terms of service that each social network has for these purposes. Okay. Okay, there are no more questions. Thank you again for participating, and as I said, you will receive the recording in a few days, and I hope to see you in our next webinar. Have a great day and see you soon.